We are talking vampire horror movie Blood Red Sky. This one is directed by Peter Thorsworth and stars Peri Baumeister and Dominic Purcell. It is actually a German movie and is spoken partly in German and partly in English. I'd actually say it falls about 50-50 in regards to the kind of the language split there. And I would best describe this as Passenger 57 meets 30 Days at Night. Now, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about the movie in regards to who the vampire actually refers to. So there will be a little bit of a spoiler if you don't want to know anything about this movie. It's revealed fairly early on what that's actually kind of referring to, and I'm sure most people probably already know this. I won't reveal anything other than spoilers other than that, but I kind of have to talk about what the vampire is referring to really discuss this movie at all. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so it focuses on this woman who is boarding this plane going from Germany to New York, who has a mysterious illness, and she is with her young son. And she boards this plane, obviously along with some other passengers, and this is obviously a night flight. And unbeknownst to them, this plane also has a number of hijackers on it that are kind of trying to take over the plane for their own means. And it kind of turns into then like the Passenger 57 kind of synopsis, so to speak. We have these kind of terrorists or, hijackers taking over the plane. And stepping up is this woman who happens to be, yes, a vampire. What'll happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss. What do I think worked in this movie? I have to say, I thought this was a very good movie. This was a well-made, exciting horror action hybrid. But let me give you a little bit of context about why I think that. Okay, this does feel like a kind of a Die Hard in a plane, which was essentially Passenger 57, just with the kind of the vampire twist. So yes, it's a kind of Die Hard clone, if you like. But I have to say, having these two kind of like a supernatural element mixed in with that kind of Die Hard clone style movie makes for an exciting film. Because guess what? I like vampires and I like Die Hard. So this movie is a win in regards to kind of a genre-mashing film. But it is done well. There is plenty of Die Hard movies that are done poorly. This one is done well. So let's start with the characters here. I think we have some really interesting characters within this film. Our mother and son combo, Peri Baumeister plays our main kind of character, if you like, and she is this woman who has been affected with this kind of vampire virus, so to speak, but is trying to hold it back, mainly for the love of her son. And she has been a vampire for some years now, and is able to just about keep a lid on it, just about kind of maintain control through, I guess, practice, the love of the kind of a mother-son relationship, and through medication. And she's hoping to kind of go to New York to ultimately find a cure. But I thought it was such an interesting character to have this woman who is barely hanging on to kind of, not to kind of let herself get carried away and kind of succumb to bloodlust, and she's kind of really struggling, and you can kind of see it, to contain the beast within, so to speak. And then you have the added element. She's stressed out enough as it is about going on this kind of long flight. Then you have hijackers take over the plane. You can imagine it's a particularly kind of stressful environment. So I thought that kind of the tension was already kind of ratcheting up with this kind of like this synopsis before we can really into the kind of the action kind of side of it. That was good, and I thought the Peri Baumeister does a great job as this woman who you really do feel is, pained with what she's kind of having to do, and the only thing really keeping her sane is, let's just say, that he's the son, and the little boy who plays the kind of son as well. I thought did a great job. I think they work really well together, and the kid is both cute, but also I think he steps up to the plate in some of the dramatic scenes as well, which I thought was great. And we get a kind of our hijackers, we get a kind of a mix of sort of different characters as well. There's a really kind of sadistic one, and I like the kind of the bait and switch about who you might think that might be. So that was excellent. And as the film progresses, it's getting more and more violent. So this doesn't kind of hold back on any type of violence, let me tell you. And it does have a few kind of flashbacks to give you some context about kind of what has happened here. The movie also has some kind of political subtext here. For example, the hijackers, who are kind of in it for more financial means more than anything else. They take kind of any type of Middle Eastern passengers that happen to be on this plane. They are kind of setting them up to take the fall because they know that people will assume that it is some type of Muslim terrorist. We have a few kind of characters here. In fact, one of the kind of the main characters we're kind of introduced to, these kind of sort of a few Muslims and stuff who they're setting up to ultimately kind of take the fall. So there is some commentary on perceived bigotry and things like that. Even when we have our vampire, and just other people start to kind of realise that there's a supernatural creature on board. It's the assumption of what that kind of is doing. I mean, you can kind of understand it, to be fair, but nonetheless, there is kind of the movie worked hard to make this kind of our kind of central character quite sympathetic, even though she is a killer. And I think the film does a great job with that. There's some pretty good action sequences here, and there's a few kind of like, maybe not twists, and I wouldn't say twists exactly, but the movie kind of zigs and zags as we kind of go along with kind of like, different people kind of getting the upper hand and then losing it as the movie kind of progresses. It's exciting. I thought the effects work was done well. The vampire makeup reminds me a lot of 30 Days of Night because it has that sort of savage vampires. I mean, vampires to me are a subject matter that never really, they don't really feel scary to me. As a horror creature, vampires rarely feel as a scary, dangerous. The one movie previously that I would say, at least in modern kind of era, that kind of was the exception to that was 30 Days of Night, where you got the sense that the vampires in that film were feral, were dangerous, would slaughter, hundreds of people potentially. And the vampire kind of mythology in this is similar. There's some intriguing kind of flashbacks as well, which give you some context about the vampire virus in a more general sense, which I thought was pretty interesting, and kind of where the characters' motivations will be, and what they might be feeling when they kind of have this particular virus, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. Maybe what doesn't work for me, I think the movie is a tad long. It kind of, I thought it was going to end at a particular point, and it kind of just carried on. I don't think it's unbearably long. I think it's, I don't want to say all films should be kind of 90 minutes, but to me, it maybe had one action beat too many. I think it kind of like, had it been a little bit shorter, maybe only about 10 minutes, I would say. I would say this would have been more of a punchy film. It's about a 2-hour film. I still think it could have a little bit of length in it, but I would have maybe cut about 10 to 15 minutes just to make it. I don't think you needed so many kind of similar action beats within the film. There are a couple of kind of lapses in logic here. One of the kind of the first acts of violence we see, kind of our main character kind of like pull herself when she's kind of covered in blood, pull herself to hide to hide in a different area. But there should have been like a blood trail and stuff, and kind of there isn't, or no one kind of sees it, which was a little silly, to be honest with you. I did feel there was some of the kind of the story elements here were lacking a little bit of context. Number one, I want to call it terrorists, but there were more hijackers. About what their kind of end game was, it gives you a few. I mean, the movie deliberately doesn't really go into too much detail about that, but to me, it kind of, you would wonder why people would take these risks if we don't really know what the reward was. It gives us some idea, but it never really tells you. And I think the movie doesn't really get good a job of kind of explaining the motivations of our kind of hijackers. As I say, deliberately so. But I would be more invested if I knew what their motivations was, and why they would kind of be willing to do the things that they were willing to do and put their own lives in danger. We never really get to know that, which I thought was a little bit of a missed opportunity. And the same thing as well with the kind of the actual vampire virus as a whole, because we learn that this virus is like an uncontrollable rage. And I kind of wanted to know a little bit about how this woman has been able to control this virus for what appears to be about 7 or 8 years, because that's how old her son is in the kind of like the kind of the present, so to speak. But we see she contracts it when the son is just a baby. So she's had it for about 7 or so years, and it kind of contradicts what we see a little bit later on. So I think it could have benefited from saying she was able to have control because of this or that reason, whatever it might be. But it doesn't really do that. You know, it hints that she's taking some medicine, but is that 7 years worth? You know, again, I don't want to spoil too much for this film for you. So to me, just did a little bit more fleshing out about the vampire virus as it pertains to this film and how this woman has been dealing with it, because it didn't seem to be quite consistent in the movie. The other last thing I'll say about this movie, and this is more a personal thing that I don't like in films, it has a scene at the beginning of the movie which takes place right kind of towards the end, and it's just thinking, I always find when the film does that, it deflates tension, because we know that certain characters will be fine at that, you know, because we know that there's a scene that's going to happen later on. Why do films do this? I never understand it. I feel, you know, we see a scene at the beginning of the film, and we see characters in that scene that we know that will be fine up until that point. I don't understand why filmmakers do this. But I enjoyed this film a lot. It was a thoroughly well-made film, and I thought the acting was great. I thought the character work was fantastic. It had a little bit of kind of commentary, social commentary, without kind of being too kind of beating you over the head, but it kind of, made you think about people's, you know, prejudices and kind of like, you know, nature versus nurture, things like this. Lots of good stuff in there without kind of being too overly vert or too kind of preachy, and overall had an exciting action horror story with some great characters. So I'll give this one, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.